My name is Claire Hart, and the day my father finally called me after years of silence, it was not to say he missed me, it was to ask me to come home and sit quietly, while my family stole what my grandmother meant for me to have. They did not know that by the time I agreed to that meeting, I had already decided something. I would walk into their trap smile and let them think I was still the invisible daughter. Then I would turn the tables on every single one of them. I was 30 when it happened, old enough to know that revenge does not always look like screaming or slamming doors. Sometimes it looks like a calm voice in a judge's chamber and a signed piece of paper that changes who owns the house you grew up in. But I am getting ahead of myself. The call came on a gray Thursday afternoon. I was at the circulation desk of the university library, sliding a stack of returned books across the scanner, enjoying the quiet rhythm of beep stamp slide. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it. Most people who mattered to me texted instead of calling. Then I saw the caller ID, Dad's cell. For a second, I forgot how to breathe. It had been more than 7 years since I walked out of that house and never looked back. More than 7 birthdays. More than 7 Christmas dinners, where my name was not on any place card. The phone kept vibrating in my hand. I stared at his name, thinking, "You are about 7 years too late." I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A minute later, the notification appeared, new message. I stood behind the desk, heart pounding, while a student asked me where the psychology section was. I answered on autopilot, pointed toward the elevator, smiled the practiced neutral library smile. When I was alone again, I pressed play and held the phone just far enough away that his voice sounded like it was coming from another planet. "Hey, Claire. It is Dad, just wondering how you have been. It has been a while. Look, your mom and I and Emily and Noah, we have been talking. We really think you should come home for a bit. Your grandmother passed away last week, and there are some things we need to go over, the will and all that. Call me back." That was it. "No, I am sorry. No, we should have called sooner. Just the will and all that." Like inheritance was a casual errand. I laughed, but it came out sharp and humorless. Of course, my family did not remember me for 7 years, but my grandmother's will brought me back onto their radar. I slipped the phone into my pocket and went back to work, but every beep at the scanner sounded like the word will. Every shuffle of pages sounded like my father clearing his throat, trying to sound casual while his mind counted money. I lasted another hour before I texted my roommate, "Claire, my dad called Jonah. Wow. Are we talking? I have seen the light called, or I need something called Claire. Grandmother died. He said something about the will, Jonah. So definitely I need something. You okay, Claire?" "Not sure. I just know he would not call unless there were dollar signs attached." That night, Jonah and I sat at our mismatched kitchen table, eating cheap pasta out of chipped bowls. The apartment was small and crooked, but it was mine. Ours. The pipes rattled. The heater groaned and the window stuck in the winter. But no one here treated my silence like an obligation, or my presence like a burden. "Are you going to call him back?" Jonah asked gently. "I do not know," I said. Part of me wants to throw the phone in the sink and let it drown. Another part of me wants to know what exactly they think I am good enough for now. He twirled his fork, thinking Jonah had the kind of quiet, steady presence that did not ask for attention. "You do not owe them anything," he said. "Not after all that." I knew what he meant by all that. He meant the years of family drama, the favoritism, the silent birthdays. He meant the night I had finally walked out of that house at 18 with 1 duffel bag and 100 crumpled dollars, and no one called to ask where I was. "You are right," I said. "I do not owe them. But maybe my grandmother does, and I owe her." There it was, the truth sliding into the light. If there was one person in that toxic family who had ever truly seen me, it was my grandmother Eleanor. She used to squeeze my hand under the Thanksgiving dinner table when my mother praised Emily's new promotion and forgot to ask me about my classes. She would slip $20 bills into my coat pocket on Christmas, whispering, "For your own plans, sweetheart." The last time I saw her, I was leaving for college with a scholarship and a car that barely ran. She hugged me so tight my ribs ached. "You build a life where you are not a shadow," she said. "Promise me that." I promised. Then I left, and somewhere along the way we lost touch. Maybe my parents intercepted letters. Maybe she got sick. I told myself I would reach out again when things were more stable. Now she was gone. I will call him, I told Jonah. But not because he wants me to, because I need to know what they did with her. I called my father the next day, during my break sitting on a bench outside the library watching students rush by with backpacks and coffee. He picked up on the second ring, Claire.
Yes.
He sounded almost surprised I had answered. It is good to hear your voice. He did not ask where I was living or what I was doing. He went straight to the point. Like I said, your grandmother passed. The lawyer has to go over the inheritance, the will. We are all meeting at her old house next week. You should be there. You are still part of the family. That line almost made me choke. You are still part of the family. Now, when there was an estate, a will, an inheritance. Suddenly, I existed again. What exactly is this meeting? I asked, keeping my voice flat. It is just the formal reading. Paperwork. We will all be there. Your mother, Emily, Noah, the attorney. We just need you to sign some things. There it was. We need you to sign some things. Not we miss you. Not we are sorry. Just sign here. Invisible girl. Let me think about it, I said. Do not take too long, he replied. The lawyer has a schedule. When I hung up, my stomach twisted. My mind jumped back, not to my grandmother's soft hand in mine, but to another night at that house years before I left. The night I learned exactly where I stood in my parents' priorities. I was 16. It was my birthday. Or rather, it was supposed to be my birthday. Most people think the loud families are the toxic ones, the ones who shout, slam doors, throw plates. Mine never had to raise their voices to cause damage. They wielded silence like a weapon and favoritism like a religion. My parents, Judith and Robert Hart, had 3 children. Emily, the eldest, the golden one. She was the daughter in the framed photos, the one with the perfect posture and the big toothy smile, the one who got the best Christmas gifts, the best seat at Thanksgiving dinners, the biggest slice of cake at every birthday. Then Noah, the youngest, their surprise baby. The sweet, clumsy, infinitely forgiven child who could crash his bike into the garage door and be rewarded with ice cream for being such a trooper. I was the middle child. You know that saying about the squeaky wheel getting the grease? I was the wheel they forgot to install. When I was little, I thought it was my fault. If I talked less, helped more. Maybe my mother would notice me, so I became useful. I did dishes without being asked. I folded laundry. I watched Noah when Emily was out with friends. I learned to read my parents' moods, to step in with coffee, to vanish when their faces tightened. At 12, I brought home straight A's on a report card, heart-pounding, eager to show them. That is great, honey, my mother said, glancing at the paper for half a second before turning to Emily. Now, Em, tell me about this cheerleading tryout. They picked you for captain already. I stood there holding my report card like a ticket that had been rejected at the gate. My father ruffled Noah's hair and promised him a new video game if he passed all his classes. No one remembered what I had done. I learned early that in my family's particular brand of family drama, attention was a finite resource, and I was not on the approved list. That is how my 16th birthday disappeared. I woke up that morning with a flicker of hope. Grandmother Eleanor had already texted me happy birthday at 6 in the morning. She always remembered. She asked what kind of cake I wanted. I showered, dressed, and came downstairs to the kitchen, expecting at least a happy birthday kiddo from one of my parents. The kitchen was busy, crowded, but not because of me. My mother was decorating a carrot cake. Emily sat at the counter in a new dress, trying on lipstick in the reflection of the microwave door. My father was on the phone talking about reservations. What is going on? I asked, sliding into a chair. Do not forget, we have to leave at 6, my mother said, pointing a frosting knife at Emily. Your reservation is at 7. Emily grinned. I know, Mom. What reservation? I asked. For Emily's scholarship dinner, my father said, they are honoring the top graduating seniors from the private schools. Right, I said, of course. The carrot cake, it turned out, was for that dinner. They were having an extra dessert before they left. A little pre-celebration. No one mentioned that the date on the calendar in small letters also said, Claire birthday. I waited all day for someone to realize maybe they would remember when the mail came. Maybe my grandmother's card would jog their memory. But when the mail slot clicked, my mother flipped through the envelopes, pulled out a glossy invitation to some charity gala, and set everything else aside, including a small card addressed in Eleanor's shaky handwriting. When she saw it was for me, she tucked it under a pile of magazines out of sight as if my existence cluttered the counter. By nightfall, my hope had melted into a familiar hollow ache. They left in a rush, laughing, adjusting collars, checking lipstick. Emily twirled once by the front door, her dress flaring. "How do I look?" she asked. "Beautiful," my mother said, eyes shining. They did not ask if I wanted to come. I was told to heat up leftover lasagna for myself and Noah, to make sure he brushed his teeth to put him to bed by 9. After they left, I put a frozen pizza in the oven instead. Noah and I watched cartoons. When I tucked him in, he mumbled, "Good night, Claire." And that was the closest thing I got to a birthday greeting in my own house. At 11:30 at night, I sat on my bed in the dark, phone in hand, staring at the blank screen. No messages from my parents, no crooked late. "Sorry, kiddo, we forgot." Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my grandmother. "I hope today was gentle with you," she wrote. "I know it is not the celebration you deserve, but I am so proud of the young woman you are becoming. Your time is coming. Claire. Please do not let their blindness convince you that you are small." I cried until my throat hurt, trying to make no sound at all. 2 days later, there was a family dinner at my grandmother's house, a belated celebration that was mostly about Emily's scholarship and Noah's soccer game. My birthday became an afterthought. A side note, at one point I went into the kitchen to help Eleanor wash dishes. She was quiet for a while, then said, "I saw your eyes the other night." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "When your parents left for that dinner," she said softly, "you looked like the last kid waiting at a bus stop that forgot its route." "I am fine," I lied. She turned off the water, wiped her hands, and took my face gently between her palms. "Listen to me, Claire," she said. "Your parents, they have their faults. They get lost in appearances. In this idea of success, they forget what is real. But I see you. I see how you hold this family together quietly, like mortar between bricks. I want you to know that you matter, even when they make you feel excluded." I swallowed hard. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And I will not let them erase you when I am gone. That is a promise." At the time, I thought she meant she would keep inviting me over, that she would remember my birthdays, that she would keep being the only adult who ever truly listened when I spoke. I did not know she was talking about her will. I did not know that years later, that promise would become the center of a battle that would show me exactly how far my parents were willing to go to keep me in the shadows. I left home 2 years after that conversation in Eleanor's kitchen. There was not a single dramatic fight. No screaming, no suitcase thrown down the stairs. Just a slow realization that I could disappear from that house and the walls would not remember my name. At 18, I decided to test it. On my 18th birthday, I did not remind anyone. No hints, no circling dates on calendars, no passive little comments about being another year older. I wanted to see if they would notice without being prompted. They did not. The day came and went like any other. My mother complained about traffic. My father bragged about Emily's latest award. Noah asked if I could help him with a school project. Not one person said happy birthday, Claire. That night, after everyone went to bed, I packed a duffel bag, a few changes of clothes, my laptop, some books, the thin folder that held my scholarship papers. I counted the cash I had saved from an after-school job at a coffee shop. Each crumpled bill, a small, defiant act of self-preservation. I paused in the hallway outside my parents' bedroom, listening. My mother's laugh murmured through the door as she watched some late-night show. My father coughed. They sounded content, untouched by the fact that their middle child had spent another birthday as a ghost. For a second, I thought about knocking, about standing in the doorway and asking point blank, "Do I matter to you?" But then I realized I already knew the answer. Their love came with conditions, trophies, headlines, image. I would not twist myself into a shape that fit their frame anymore. I left my house quietly, closing the front door with exaggerated care so it would not click. The night air was cool on my face. My car, an old sedan, my grandmother had helped me buy by slipping me money behind my parents' backs, sat under the street lamp. I loaded my bag into the trunk, slid behind the wheel, and did not look back. I kept waiting for my phone to ring. It did not ring that night. It did not ring the next day. A week passed. 2. I started classes at a state college, moved into a tiny basement apartment with a stranger found through campus housing, and began stringing together a life that was small but mine. I got a job at a 24-hour diner off the highway. It was the kind of place where the coffee was always slightly burnt and the regulars tipped in crumpled singles and stories. My boss, Carl, cared about one thing: whether you showed up and did your job. The cook. Rita was a broad-shouldered woman with tattooed forearms and a laugh that could rattle the windows. She watched me fumble through my first breakfast rush, dropping toast and mixing up table numbers, then handed me a mop at the end of the shift. "You are still standing," she said. "You will be fine. Rule 1: never run out of coffee. Rule 2: Table 7 likes extra bacon but pretends they do not. Rule 3: whatever is going on in your life, leave it outside that door. The pancakes do not care." I learned to carry 3 plates in one hand. I learned which truck drivers wanted to talk and which ones just wanted silence. I learned the satisfaction of work where effort and reward had a simple, direct line. When my shift ended, I walked back to my apartment with the smell of grease in my hair and sore feet, and for the first time in my life, the quiet felt like freedom instead of exile. I met Jonah the following semester on campus when he spilled coffee all over his laptop and swore under his breath in a way that was more resigned than angry. "You okay?" I asked. "Depends," he said, staring at the dripping keyboard. "Do you know how to resurrect dead electronics?" Maybe I said, "if the tech gods are kind." We ended up in the library's computer lab, spreading his laptop on a table like it was a patient. I had always been good with machines. They were simpler than people, more honest. If something broke, there was a reason. There was a fix. By the time Jonah's laptop spluttered back to life, he looked at me like I had performed a miracle. "You are a lifesaver," he said. "I am Jonah." "Claire," I replied. We became roommates a year later, after my previous roommate moved in with her boyfriend. Jonah was soft-spoken, thoughtful, the kind of person who remembered which snacks you liked and left the last slice of pizza for you, without making a big deal out of it. He did not ask often about my family, but when he did, he listened without trying to fix anything. When people at school swapped stories about their parents visiting for homecoming or their siblings crashing on their couches, I kept my answers vague. "We do not really talk," I would say, and most people let it go. A few pushed, "Why not? Did you have a fight?" I learned to shut down those conversations with a small smile and a change of subject. The truth felt too raw to share with strangers. My parents' neglect was not a single wound, but 1,000 tiny cuts over years. There was no one story that explained it. There was just a pattern of favoritism, a toxic family dynamic where I existed to fill gaps, not to be seen. The only person from that old life who ever crossed my mind with something like warmth was my grandmother. I meant to call her, I meant to visit. I told myself I would do it when I had more time, more money, more stability. Then one day time ran out, and my father's voicemail told me she was gone. Standing in that library, listening to his casual explanation about the will, I felt something inside me shift. My grandmother had once promised she would not let them erase me when she was gone. If my parents were suddenly eager for me to sign some papers, I needed to find out whether they were trying to erase me now. So when my father texted the date and time of the meeting at Eleanor's old house, I replied with 2 words: "I will." On the day of the meeting, I drove back to the town. I had once called home with my jaw clenched so tight my teeth ached. The roads were the same. The strip malls, the gas station on the corner where teenagers used to hang around in their parents' cars. Even the sky seemed to have the same washed-out blue I remembered from high school. But I was not the same girl who had left. I parked a block away from my grandmother's house and sat in the car for a minute, fingers gripping the steering wheel. The Hart family house where I grew up was across town, a big beige monument to appearances. Eleanor's home, though smaller, had always felt warmer. She had a garden out front, wild and overgrown, where she used to plant herbs and talk to them as if they were old friends. When I stepped out of the car, my legs felt weirdly light, like they belonged to someone else. The mansion, that was what the neighbors used to call it, even though it was really just a nice house in a nice neighborhood. Today it looked tired. The paint was fading, the hedges untrimmed. My parents' cars were already in the driveway. Emily's shiny new sedan, Noah's slightly beat-up hatchback. I wondered briefly whose name was on the titles. whether my parents had co-signed old habits. I walked up the front path, each step echoing with 1,000 old memories. Eleanor's laugh drifting out of the kitchen, the smell of cinnamon at Christmas, the murmur of voices at Thanksgiving dinner as my parents bragged about Emily's achievements and barely mentioned that I existed. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there wearing a dark dress and a string of pearls. Her hair was sprayed into place. Her expression flickered when she saw me, something like relief quickly smoothed over with polite surprise. "Claire," she said, "you came." "Apparently my schedule aligned with your lawyer's," I replied. She winced at the edge in my voice, but did not comment. "Well, come in. We are just getting started." The living room was full. My father stood near the fireplace, one hand in his pocket, looking at his watch as if the attorney's time was the only thing that mattered. Emily perched on the couch perfectly. Put together, her blonde hair styled her outfit, effortless, in that curated way that screams. I tried very hard to look like. I did not try at all. Noah leaned against a wall, scrolling on his phone, looking older, broader, but still somehow like the kid who had once trailed after me asking for help with homework. And then there was the man I did not know, sitting in Eleanor's favorite armchair, a leather briefcase at his feet. He stood when I entered. "You must be Claire," he said, extending a hand. "I am Daniel Collins. I handled your grandmother's estate." I shook his hand. His grip was firm but not crushing. His eyes were steady and professional, the way you would expect from an estate lawyer. My father gestured vaguely. "We were just waiting on you. Let us sit." I sat in an armchair across from the couch, back straight, hands resting on my knees. I could feel Emily's eyes on me, assessing. My mother sat beside her, lips pressed together. The lawyer opened his briefcase, pulled out a stack of papers, and cleared his throat. "First, let me say, I am sorry for your loss," he began. "Eleanor was a wonderful woman. She was very clear about her wishes, and my job is simply to read them and see that they are carried out." Wonderful woman. Clear wishes. The words scraped against my ribs. Because if Eleanor had been clear, why did my father sound so eager, so rehearsed on the phone? The lawyer began reading the will. It started with the usual formalities: full name, date, mental soundness. Then he moved into the personal bequests. To a few charities, modest sums. To an old friend, a piece of jewelry. My heart squeezed when he mentioned a donation to the local library that was so like her. Then he got to the family portion. "To my daughter Judith and my son-in-law Robert," he read, "I leave a fair amount, more than fair enough to pay off any lingering debts, enough to keep them comfortable. To my eldest grandchild Emily," he continued, "I leave." Emily straightened, a small smile curving her mouth. The amount was generous, more than generous. Her eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "To my youngest grandchild Noah, I leave another large sum. Not quite as large as Emily's, but still enough to give him a comfortable cushion in life." The lawyer paused, flipped a page. My palms were damp. "And to my middle grandchild Claire," he said, "I leave." I held my breath. There was another pause, just a fraction of a second too long. He glanced at my father, then read my love and encouragement to follow her own path. Silence swallowed the room. I stared at him. My love and encouragement. My mother let out a small, sympathetic murmur, the kind people make at funerals over cheap sandwiches. Emily pursed her lips like she was trying hard not to gloat. Noah glanced up from his phone, eyes flicking between me and the stack of papers. I felt like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. My grandmother, the one person who had ever really seen me, left my siblings money and left me a Hallmark card sentiment. That made no sense. Is that all?" I asked, my voice sounding far away to my own ears. Daniel nodded, flipping through the pages. "There are a few instructions about the house itself," he said. "Your grandmother requested that the property be sold and the proceeds split between Judith and Robert. The rest of the estate has been distributed as described." "See?" my father said quickly. "Nothing complicated, just the usual. We just needed everyone there so the attorney could say he had read everything out loud." I looked at his face, at my mother's carefully composed grief, at Emily's satisfied glow. Something was wrong. It was not just the content. It was the way the lawyer had hesitated, the way he had glanced at my father, the way my father had practically leaped in to smooth things over. I might have spent my childhood being overlooked, but I had learned how to read a room. "Can I see the document?" I asked. Daniel hesitated just long enough to confirm my suspicion, then handed me a copy. The pages shook slightly in my hands, but not because I was scared, because I was angry. I read the relevant sections carefully. The language was standard. The signatures looked legitimate. It was dated 6 months before my grandmother died. 6 months. I remembered then a different memory. I had been 19 home for a brief weekend to see an old friend. I had stopped by Eleanor's house without telling anyone. She had been thinner, her hair whiter, but her eyes just as sharp. We had tea in her kitchen. At some point, she mentioned going to see a lawyer. "Just putting things in order," she had said. "I want to make sure my will reflects how I feel." I had not thought much of it then. Now, staring at this document, I felt a cold certainty settle in my stomach. This was not how she felt. This was how someone else wanted her to feel. "Claire," my mother said softly. "Honey, do not look like that. Your grandmother loved you very much." "So much she left me nothing," I replied. "That is not nothing," Emily chimed in. "She left you her blessing. She trusted you to make your own way. You have always been so independent." I laughed a harsh, disbelieving sound. "You mean she trusted you and Noah with actual money, and trusted me with a pat on the head?" My father's eyes hardened. "Do not make this ugly," he said. "Your grandmother made her decisions. Maybe if you had been around more." The implication hung in the air. It was my fault I had left. I had been excluded from the inheritance because I chose to escape the toxic family dynamic they had created. My hands tightened on the papers. If I let it end there, they would win. They would keep the money, the house, the narrative. I would go back to my apartment, back to my life. And this would become just another story of injustice that I told my friends over cheap wine. But I could not shake Eleanor's words from years ago. "I will not let them erase you when I am gone." Somewhere beneath this polished legal language and these satisfied faces, there was a secret, a hidden truth. I did not care what it took. I was going to find it. "Fine," I said calmly, setting the papers down. "If that is her wish, then that is her wish." My mother visibly relaxed. Emily leaned back smug. Noah went back to his phone. "I just have one question," I added. The lawyer looked up wary. "Yes. When exactly did my grandmother first make a will?" I asked. "And how many times did she change it?" Silence spread through the room like a slow spill. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. His gaze flickered just once toward my father. Robert stepped in before the lawyer could speak. "What does that matter?" he asked. "This is her final will. That is what counts." I did not ask what counts. I said I asked how many times she changed it. Emily rolled her eyes. "Claire, do not be dramatic. Grandmother was sick. She probably wanted to simplify things. You are always so sensitive about money." I almost laughed at that. I had spent most of my adult life counting coins and tips, budgeting down to the last dollar while she effortlessly floated through a life propped up by parental support. But I was the one sensitive about money. "I am not asking how much anyone got. I said I am asking about the process." Noah surprisingly spoke up. "I mean, it is a fair question," he muttered. "Grandma always talked about treating us equally." My mother shot him a warning look, but it was too late. The word equally was out in the air, bouncing between us. "She did update it several times," Daniel said slowly. "That is not unusual over someone's lifetime. Circumstances change, people change. This is simply the most recent version." Why did his answer feel rehearsed? "Can I ask something?" I said. "Was I included in previous versions?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "I am not at liberty to discuss prior drafts of a will that is no longer in force." Translation, yes? My father stepped forward, placing a hand on the back of the attorney's chair, towering over him. "We are done here," he said. "Claire, you heard the reading? There is nothing else." Daniel flinched almost imperceptibly at my father's tone. I tucked that away. I pushed my chair back and stood. "You are right," I said. "We are done here for now." My mother stood as well. "Claire, do not do this," she said, her voice slipping into the gentle, manipulative cadence she used when she wanted compliance. "Your grandmother would be heartbroken if she saw you causing friction over money." "She is not the one I am worried about," I replied. "I am worried about whether her actual wishes were respected." My father's jaw tightened. "You think we would lie about what she wanted?" I met his eyes. "I think you would do a lot to keep up appearances, including letting me be the excluded child at every single family event and then pretending it is my fault I left." His face darkened. "Claire," Emily huffed, This is exactly why no one can talk to you. You always turn everything into an argument. Grandmother loved you. She left you her blessing. Some people would be grateful for that. Some people, I said coolly, did not get cut out of an inheritance by the same parents who forgot their 16th birthday because they were too busy taking their other daughter to a scholarship dinner. Emily's mouth snapped shut. My mother's cheeks flushed. That is not fair, she said. We did what we thought was best. For whom I asked, no one answered. I picked up my bag and headed toward the door. As I passed Daniel, I paused. Thank you for your time, I said in a polite, even tone that felt like a knife wrapped in velvet. I might have a few follow-up questions later. Perhaps outside of my father's living room. Our eyes met for a brief second. In that moment, I saw something there that gave me a strange, sharp flicker of hope. Guilt. Of course, he said softly. My office number is on the card I gave your parents. You are welcome to call. My father bristled. That will not be necessary. There is nothing else to discuss. Daniel looked down at his papers, lips pressing together. I walked out of the house, the old wooden floor creaking under my feet. The air outside felt colder, cleaner. I got into my car and sat there, hands shaking, not from fear but from the unwinding of years of swallowed anger. I had no concrete evidence yet. No smoking gun, just a gut feeling and a lawyer who seemed more uncomfortable than he should have been. But sometimes injustice is not a lightning bolt. It is a series of tiny, crooked lines. On the drive back to the city, my phone buzzed. Jonah, did you survive? Claire, barely. Jonah. Want to talk about it, Claire? Not yet. I need to think first. And maybe Google the phrase contesting a will until my eyes bleed. Jonah. I will make coffee. By the time I got home, my anger had cooled into something more focused. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, searching terms like undue influence and capacity to sign, and how to challenge a will in state probate court. The language was dense, but the concepts were not foreign to me. A will could be challenged if there was evidence the person making it was coerced, misled, or not mentally competent. A new will could override previous versions, but the process had to be clean. What if that was the crack? The more I read, the more one thought took root in my mind. If my grandmother had once included me and later removed me, someone would have had to convince her to make that change. And if they had done that, there might be a trail. Medical records, emails, notes from the attorney. I looked up the name on the business card my father had left on the coffee table. Collins and Avery Estate Law. I stared at the number, chewing my lip. Jonah came in and set a mug of coffee beside my laptop. You look like you are about to hack into a federal database, he said. I muttered. If that database has my grandmother's original will. I told him what had happened, the unequal amounts, the nothing I was left. The lawyer's hesitation, the way my father had practically spoken over him. Jonah listened without interrupting, eyes steady. What are you going to do? He asked when I finished. I am going to find out whether they changed her will when she was too sick to fight back, I said. And if they did, I am going to undo it. He nodded slowly. That is a big fight, Claire. It is you versus your entire family. I thought about my parents' faces, my mother's dismissive sympathy, Emily's smugness, the way my father had always used words like responsibility and loyalty when he meant obedience. It has always been me versus them, I said quietly. The only difference now is that I have something to fight for besides my own sanity. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the card. Daniel answered on the second ring. Collins and Avery, this is Daniel speaking. This is Claire Hart, I said. We met today. A pause. Yes, of course. How can I help you? I have a question, I said, strictly as the granddaughter of your former client. All right, he said cautiously. How many versions of her will did my grandmother sign in the last 10 years? There was a long exhale on the other end of the line. Ms. Hart, Daniel said carefully. You understand there are confidentiality rules that apply to my work with your grandmother. I understand, I said. I am not asking for amounts or details. I am asking about patterns. I am asking as someone who watched her love me all my life and then saw that love vanish in a legal document right after she got sick. I just want to know if that vanishing act was hers or someone else's. Silence. Then the faint sound of papers rustling. Finally, he said, she signed 4 separate wills over the course of the past decade. 4. My heart thudded. And he continued slowly. You were included as a beneficiary in the first 3. What changed? I asked. Her health, he said, and the people around her. I swallowed. meaning my parents. I am not going to accuse anyone of anything over the phone, he replied. But I will say this, the last will, the one I read today, was signed after a very difficult meeting. Your grandmother seemed anxious and confused. Your parents insisted she was simply tired and wanted to simplify things. Did you believe them, I asked? At the time, I convinced myself I did, he said quietly. But in hindsight, I have questions. So did I. Why did you not say anything today? I pressed. When you saw their faces, when you read that section about me, because the will as it stands is valid on its face, he said. It was signed, witnessed, notarized. Contesting it would require evidence of undue influence or lack of capacity. And frankly, challenging a will is a long, painful process. Most families choose not to go through it, especially over something like being left out. Something like being left out, I repeated bitterly. You really think this is about hurt feelings? I do not know you well enough to say, he said. But I do know this. Your grandmother came to see me alone a few months before that final meeting. My chest tightened. What did she say? He hesitated. She asked questions about how wills work, about whether someone could pressure her to change one. She seemed worried. I told her she could always refuse to sign anything she did not understand, that she had the right to make any arrangements she wanted. And then he said, your parents started bringing her to every appointment. They sat in. They answered questions for her. At the last meeting, she was on medication. She seemed foggy. They insisted she was fine. My throat burned. Why did you let them stay? I asked. He sighed. Because I am human. Because they said they were taking care of her. Because I told myself I was respecting her wishes. I regret that now. So you think there is a chance she did not really understand what she was signing, I said. I think there is a chance she signed something she would not have signed under different circumstances, he answered. But my opinion is not enough. You would need evidence, medical records, witness statements, something concrete. And if I got that, I said, then you could file a petition to contest the will, he replied. A judge would decide whether to set it aside, revert to an earlier version, or create an equitable solution. Equitable. My family and that word had never belonged in the same sentence. Thank you, I said, for being honest. Ms. Hart, he said, before I could hang up. Off the record, your grandmother spoke of you often. She was proud of you. Whatever the final will says. I do not believe she wanted to erase you. My eyes stung. Neither do I said. After we hung up, I sat at the table for a long time staring at nothing. Then I grabbed my keys. Where are you going? Jonah asked, looking up from the couch. I am going to find a lawyer who works for me, I said. Not for them. Mark, the law. Student who worked nights at the library, help desk came to mind. He had mentioned once that his aunt was a probate attorney. Normally, I would have hesitated to mix my messy family drama with my work life. But this was not normal. At the library, Mark was hunched over a casebook highlighter in hand. Hey, I said. He looked up, smiled. Hey, Claire. What brings you here on your night off? Missing the smell of old books already? I need a favor, I said. And also possibly a lawyer. His eyebrows rose. That sounds ominous. We found an empty study room. I told him everything from the forgotten birthdays to the will reading, to the uneasy attorney. By the time I finished, Mark's expression had shifted from sympathetic to sharp. This smells like classic undue influence, he said. An elderly woman declining health dependent on your parents for care suddenly changes a long-standing plan to benefit the same people who control her environment. A judge would at least take a hard look at that. I exhaled slowly. Do you think your aunt would talk to me? I think she would be very interested, he said. She hates bullies, especially in families. 2 days later, I sat in a small conference room in a downtown office. The name Alvarez and Kim on the door. The walls lined with law books, the table scattered with files. Across from me sat Maria Alvarez, a woman in her 50s with silver streaks in her dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. Mark had given her the broad strokes, I filled in the details. My grandmother made it very clear when I was younger that she would not let my parents erase me, I said. Now this final will does exactly that. I think they pushed her into signing it when she was sick. Do you have any documentation? Maria asked. Medical records, emails, anything from the previous attorney? Not yet, I admitted. But he told me she had made multiple wills before, and I was included in the earlier ones. He also said she came to him alone once to ask about coercion. After that, my parents started bringing her to every meeting. Maria leaned back considering, "This is not going to be easy," she said. "Contesting a will never is. It will be time-consuming, emotionally draining, and your relationship with your family, which sounds strained already, will likely be destroyed." I almost laughed. "We have not had a real relationship in years," I said. "The only reason they called me now was the inheritance. They only see me as a signature they need. I am not destroying anything that is not already broken." She nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "If we do this, our strategy will be simple. We find out exactly what your grandmother's health was like around the time the final will was signed. We look for changes in her medications, cognitive assessments, anything that could indicate diminished capacity. And the lawyer I asked, can he testify? He can certainly be questioned," she said. "If he expresses doubts about her condition or the pressure your parents applied, that will help. We can also subpoena his files and any notes he took." The idea of putting my family under that kind of legal microscope should have scared me. Instead, I felt a strange calm. All my life, they had controlled the narrative. They had told everyone we were a perfectly happy family, that I was the difficult one, the ungrateful one. They had made sure I grew up in the background of my own life. Now, for once, there would be an impartial judge, a neutral room, a place where their charm and manipulation would not be enough. "I want to do it," I said. Maria nodded. "Then let us begin." We spent the next hour going over forms, authorizations, gathering information. I signed papers to request my grandmother's medical records from the months before her death. Maria drafted a letter to Daniel requesting all prior versions of the will and his notes. When I left the office, the sun was setting, painting the street in gold. This was not about greed, I reminded myself as I walked. This was about justice. About a lifetime of betrayal crystallized into one final act. About a woman who had promised not to let them erase me, and the chance to keep her promise for her when she could not. The battle had officially begun. The first shot in the battle was a stack of photocopied medical records. Maria spread them out on the conference table like a grim tarot deck. "Here," she said, tapping one page. "This is when her doctor first notes cognitive decline, memory issues, confusion." That notation appeared 3 months before the date on the final will. Here she tapped another new medication. "Side effects include dizziness, disorientation." That change was made 1 month before the will. And here she said, pulling out a form, a note about her being more withdrawn, relying heavily on your mother to answer questions. I stared at the pages, anger simmering under my skin. "How could the attorney ignore this?" I asked. "He may not have seen all of it," Maria replied. "Doctors do not automatically send updates to lawyers. But if he spoke to your grandmother and noticed anything off, he should have documented it. We had his notes too now. Daniel, perhaps out of guilt, had provided more detail than strictly necessary. In the file from the final appointment he had written, client seemed tired. Repeated questions several times. Daughter and son-in-law present. They answered many questions on her behalf. Expressed desire to simplify estate leave. Larger portions to family members, providing most care. Client nodded but did not elaborate. "It is not a smoking gun," Maria said, "but it paints a picture. An elderly woman on new medication that affects her cognition, increasingly dependent on the same people who benefited from the changes." "What happens next?" I asked. "Next," she said, "we file a petition with the probate court to contest the will on the basis of undue influence and lack of capacity that will freeze distribution of the estate until the judge hears the case." "You mean my parents and siblings cannot touch the money until this is resolved?" I said. "Correct." I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. The idea of that money sitting inaccessible while they fumed felt like a small, delicious piece of payback. Then she continued, "We notify your family. They will have a chance to respond to argue that your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing." I pictured my father's indignant face, my mother's teary manipulation, Emily's tight-lipped fury. "They are going to call me greedy," I said. Maria shrugged. "Let them. The court does not care about family drama. It cares about evidence. Besides, from what you have told me, your siblings both received significant amounts. You were the only one left with nothing." "Her love and encouragement," I said dryly. Maria snorted. "If that phrase had monetary value, every parent in the world would die a millionaire." The petition was filed a week later. My mother's reaction came in the form of a long, emotional email. "I cannot believe you are doing this to us," she wrote. "Your grandmother would be horrified." that her own granddaughter is dragging the family into court over money. Your sister is devastated. Noah is confused. Your father is heartbroken. I raised you better than this. I stared at the screen, at the way she had framed my actions as an attack, their actions as righteous. I forwarded the message to Maria. She replied with a single line, "Do not respond to this. They are trying to provoke you into saying something they can use." My father called. I let it go to voicemail. "This is ridiculous." His recorded voice barked, "You are embarrassing us. Drop this nonsense. You think some judge is going to believe you over your own parents? We took care of your grandmother. We were there. You abandoned this family years ago. You do not get to come back now and demand a piece of what you did not earn." I saved that message. Anger sharpened my focus, not blunted it. Emily, as expected, took to social media. "Some people will do anything for money," she posted with a filtered photo of herself under a tree, looking tragically brave. Family betrayal is the worst kind of betrayal. She did not mention my name, but everyone in our extended circle knew exactly who she meant. Old classmates reached out privately. Some asked what was going on. Others scolded me, parroting the Hart family narrative. I said very little. I told them there was more to the story, that I trusted the court to sort it out. The first hearing was set for early autumn. The courthouse was modern, all glass and neutral tones, a place designed to look impartial. I sat at one table with Maria. Across the aisle sat my parents, Emily and Noah, with a lawyer of their own, a sharp-faced woman in a pinstripe suit who radiated impatience. My father refused to look at me. My mother glanced over, once her eyes already shining with tears, as if rehearsed. Emily stared straight ahead. Noah looked uneasy, his jaw clenched. The judge, a middle-aged woman with calm eyes, called the case. We were there, only to set preliminary rules, timelines for exchanging documents, dates for depositions. There would be no dramatic speeches yet, no witnesses. But even in that short hearing, the tension was thick. My parents' lawyer argued that the case was frivolous, that it was simply the product of a resentful middle child who had chosen to cut herself off from the family and now wanted to cash in. Maria responded calmly, pointing to the medical records and Daniel's notes. She spoke of cognitive decline, new medication, the sudden and dramatic change from previous wills. The judge listened, expression neutral. Finally, she said, "It appears there is enough here to warrant a full hearing. The petition will proceed. Until the matter is decided, the estate will remain undistributed." Emily let out an audible, frustrated breath. My father's shoulders tightened. As we left the courtroom, my mother hurried after me. "Claire," she said, grabbing my arm. Her voice was trembling. "Please, let us talk. Not with lawyers, not in front of a judge, just as a family." I gently removed her hand. "We tried that for 20 years, I said. "It never worked." "You are going to destroy us," she said. I thought of all the times I had set the table for Thanksgiving dinner without a place card with my name. All the Christmas mornings, where my gift pile was half the size of my siblings. All the nights I had overheard them praising Emily's big promotion, or Noah's sports wins, and never once asking if I got home safe from my midnight diner shift. "No," I said quietly, "I am not destroying you. I am just refusing to let you keep erasing me." She recoiled as if I had slapped her. "You will regret this," she said. I looked her in the eye. "I already regret plenty," I said. "Most of it involves giving you and Dad the benefit of the doubt. There would be more hearings, depositions, ugly conversations in sterile conference rooms." But as I walked out of that courthouse, Jonah waiting on the steps with a thermos of coffee and a worried smile, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not just anger, not just hurt, power. For the first time, I was not asking my parents to see me. I was forcing them to answer for what they had done. Depositions are not like the courtroom scenes you see on television. There is no dramatic background music, no gasps from the gallery, no gavel banging. Just a long table, a recorder, a court reporter's steady tapping, and questions that slip under the skin like needles. My parents were deposed first. I sat beside Maria across from them, their attorney at their side, while the court reporter swore them in. My father went first. "Mr. Hart," Maria said, her voice calm. "How often did you visit your mother-in-law in the year before her death?" "Frequently," he said. "We were there all the time." "How often is that?" she pressed. "Once a week, twice." "At least once a week," he said, "sometimes more." "And during those visits, did you ever discuss her finances?" He shifted in his chair. "We discussed her well-being. Part of that included practical matters, bills, insurance. Did you suggest that she change her will? Maria asked. His lawyer objected to the wording Maria rephrased. Did you ever raise the topic of her will with her? He hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. Yes, he said finally. But only because she asked. She said she wanted to simplify things. She knew Emily and Noah were building families, and she knew Claire had chosen a different path. The implication hung in the air. I was the one who had walked away. Therefore, I did not deserve anything. Did you ever tell her that Claire did not need to be included? Maria asked. No, he said, we respected her decisions. Did you or your wife ever answer questions on her behalf during meetings with her lawyer? Maria continued. We helped clarify things when she got confused, he said. That is what family does. Did you ever schedule those meetings, she asked. Yes, he said. She asked us to. She did not like dealing with phones. Did you ever tell anyone, including your children, that your mother-in-law's estate would fix the mortgage on your house or cover your debts? She asked. His face flushed. That is a private matter, he snapped. Maria did not back down. It is relevant, she said. You were the caretaker of a vulnerable elderly woman whose will you now benefit from. Your financial situation matters. He looked at his lawyer. The lawyer objected again. Maria noted the objection and moved on. When my mother's turn came, she played the grieving daughter. I took care of my mother, she said tearfully. I bathed her. I cooked for her. I was with her every day. I would never do anything to hurt her. Did you ever tell her that Claire had abandoned the family? Maria asked. I told her the truth. My mother said Claire left. She never visited. She never called. She did not come for Christmas. She did not come when Noah broke his arm. She did not come when Emily got engaged. That is not what I asked, Maria said evenly. I asked if you characterized her absence to your mother in ways that might influence how she felt about leaving Claire, anything. My mother dabbed her eyes. I told my mother that Claire had made her choice, she said. That she was living her own life and did not seem interested in us anymore. Emily's deposition was harsher. She bristled at every question, lips pressed together. Did your grandmother ever say she wanted to treat all her grandchildren equally? Maria asked. She said a lot of things, Emily replied. Grandmothers are sentimental. Please answer the question, Maria said. Yes, Emily snapped. She said that. And did you benefit financially from your grandmother's will? Maria asked. Of course I did. Emily huffed. She wanted to help with my kids, my future. You do not have children yet, Maria pointed out. That is not the point, Emily shot back. Noah's deposition was the only one that held any real surprise. He seemed nervous, eyes darting between his lawyer, my parents, and me. Do you remember any conversations with your grandmother about her will? Maria asked. Kind of, he said. She talked about wanting us to be okay. She said she did not care about fancy stuff, but she wanted us to have options. Did she ever mention leaving Claire out? Maria asked. He swallowed. No, he said. She said she felt bad about how Mom and Dad treated her. She said she was going to make it right. My mother shifted in her seat, shooting him a sharp look. Maria's eyes sharpened. She said that she asked, do you remember when? A while ago, he muttered, before she got really sick. One more question, Maria said. Did you ever hear your parents discuss the will between themselves? Noah hesitated. His lawyer told him he had to answer. I heard them once, he said. Finally, in the kitchen. After Grandma had been at the lawyer's, Dad said something like, once this is done, we can finally breathe. Mom said, Emily deserves it after everything she has done. And then she said, Claire will figure things out. She always does. My heart clenched. Once this is done, we can finally breathe. We always knew they saw inheritance as a rescue plan. Hearing it confirmed under oath was something else. After the depositions, Maria and I sat in her office going over transcripts. They are not cartoon villains, she said. They will not confess to manipulating a sick woman out of greed, but their own words show motive, opportunity, and benefit. Combine that with the medical records and the previous wills, and we have a strong case. Her strategy was simple: show that my grandmother had a long-standing pattern of wanting to treat us equally, that she had expressed concern about how I was treated, and that the drastic shift in the final will coincided with her cognitive decline and increased dependency on my parents. Meanwhile, my family's lawyer built their defense on the same narrative my parents had always used. Claire left. Claire did not visit. Claire does not get to complain now about being excluded. They even suggested in a subtle way that I was trying to use the legal system for revenge. They were not entirely wrong about that. Yes, I wanted justice for my grandmother. Yes, I wanted the inheritance she had intended for me. But I would be lying if I said there was not also a piece of me that savored the idea of pulling the rug out from under my parents' carefully constructed image. They had spent years ensuring that in every family photo I belonged in the background, if at all. Now for once the spotlight was on them, and it was not flattering. Outside of court prep, my life continued in strangely normal ways. I still shelved books at the library. I still shared takeout with Jonah. I still went on slow, thoughtful walks with Mark, talking about everything from case law to bad cafeteria food. One night, sitting on the steps of my apartment building, I confessed something to him I had barely admitted to myself. "I am scared," I said. "Of losing?" he asked. "Of winning," I replied. He looked at me puzzled. "If I lose," I said, "I go back to my life. Same bills, same job, same crooked apartment. Nothing changes. I will be angry, but I will survive. I have been surviving my whole life." "And if you win?" he asked. "If I win," I said softly, "everything changes. I inherit money from a woman I loved, but also from a system that tried to cut me out. I gain power my parents never wanted me to have. I take something they think belongs to them, and then I have to decide what to do with all of it." "Is that not what your grandmother wanted?" he asked gently. "For you to have options." "Yes," I said, "but she also wanted me to be kind, to be better than them." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "Wanting justice for what they did to both of you does not make you like them," he said. "Turning a blind eye would." His words stayed with me. This fight was not about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about confronting a lifetime of manipulation and saying enough. The final hearing date was set for early winter. I spent the week before pacing my kitchen, going over questions with Maria, replaying a lifetime of family scenes in my head, trying to condense complex pain into coherent testimony. On the morning of the hearing, as I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, smoothing down my thrift store blazer, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was a photo. My mother. My father, Emily, and Noah standing in front of my grandmother's old house. They were smiling, but the smile looked strained. Under it, a message. "We can still fix this without dragging the family name through the mud. Come to the house tonight. No lawyers, just us." For a second, the teenage version of me, the one who had stood in that house feeling invisible, wanted to say yes. Then I remembered my 16th birthday, my parents forgetting Emily's party, the empty chair at the table where my place should have been. I remembered my grandmother's promise. "I will not let them erase you when I am gone." No, I thought, you will not, and neither will I. I put the phone on the counter, picked up my bag, and headed to court. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No soaring ceilings, no marble columns, just rows of benches, a judge's bench, 2 tables, and the quiet murmur of people waiting for their lives to be dissected. At one table, my family sat with their attorney. My mother clutched a tissue. My father whispered something to Emily, who nodded, jaw tight. Noah stared down at his hands. At the other table, I sat with Maria, my heart thudding. The judge entered. We all rose, then sat. Maria opened with a simple statement. "Your Honor, this case is not about entitlement," she said. "It is about honoring the genuine wishes of a woman who loved all her grandchildren and about protecting her from the undue influence that tainted her final legal decisions." Over many years, Eleanor Hart expressed clearly her desire to treat her grandchildren equally. Only when she became cognitively impaired and dependent on 2 of them did her will suddenly change dramatically, favoring those caretakers and excluding the one grandchild her daughter had treated as invisible. We are here to ask the court to look past appearances and examine the reality of what happened. My parents' attorney painted a different picture. "Your Honor, this is a case of an estranged child seeking revenge through the probate system." She said Claire Hart chose to leave her family years ago. She chose not to visit her grandmother, not to participate in family gatherings, not to help with care. Eleanor, aware of who had been present and supportive in her final years, chose to leave the bulk of her estate to the daughter and grandchildren who stood by her. That is not undue influence. That is reciprocated love. The judge nodded, expression unreadable. The first witness called was Daniel. He looked uncomfortable as he took the stand, right hand raised for the oath. Maria questioned him first. Mr. Collins, she said, how long did you serve as attorney for the late Eleanor Hart? About 10 years, he said. And during that time, did you assist her in drafting more than one will, she asked? Yes, he replied, 4 in total. In the first 3, how did she distribute her estate among her grandchildren? Maria asked. He hesitated. The judge looked at him. You may answer, Mr. Collins, she said. The prior wills are relevant to determining any pattern. In the first 3 wills, he said she divided the bulk of her estate equally among her 3 grandchildren. So Claire was included? Maria asked. Yes, he said. And in the final will, she asked. She was not given a monetary bequest, he answered. What if anything changed in the period between the 3rd and 4th wills? Maria asked. Her health declined, he said. She had more difficulty getting around. She mentioned confusion at times. Her daughter Judith began accompanying her to appointments. During the meeting where the final will was signed, did you observe anything of concern? Maria asked. He glanced at my parents, then spoke. She seemed tired, he said. She repeated questions. She let her daughter and son-in-law speak for her. I asked several times if she understood the changes. She said she wanted to simplify to reward those who were there for her. I did not press as hard as I should have about why that meant excluding Claire. Do you believe in hindsight that Eleanor was fully capable of understanding the consequences of that will? Maria asked. His shoulders sagged. In hindsight, he said, I have doubts. The defense attorney hammered him on cross-examination, suggesting he was only admitting doubts now to spare himself from liability. He admitted his mistakes but stood by his impression that Eleanor had been vulnerable. Next, Maria called my grandmother's doctor, who confirmed the timeline of cognitive decline and medications. My parents' lawyer tried to frame it as normal aging. The doctor calmly explained the difference between mild forgetfulness and significant impairment. Then it was my turn. Taking the stand felt like stepping onto a stage I had never wanted but always been pushed toward. Maria's questions were gentle but precise. She walked me through my childhood, the pattern of favoritism, the birthday forgotten incident, the countless Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings where my parents' attention flowed effortlessly to Emily and Noah. Did your grandmother witness these dynamics? She asked. Yes, I said. She pulled me aside after my 16th birthday and told me she saw how they treated me. She said she would not let them erase me when she was gone. And did you discuss her will with her? Maria asked. Not in detail, I said. She mentioned once that she wanted to treat us equally. She said it was her way of showing that I mattered, even if my parents made me feel excluded. Maria then had me recount the will reading. The lawyer's hesitation. My parents' reactions. And how did being left out make you feel? She asked. Honestly, I said it hurt. Not because of the money, because it felt like proof that my grandmother had finally stopped seeing me too. But when I found out there were previous wills where I was included, and that the change happened when she was sick, and my parents controlled her environment, it started to feel less like a choice, and more like manipulation. Like another form of the injustice I grew up with, but this time on paper. The defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal. Is it not true that you chose to leave home at 18, she asked. Yes, I said, after years of being neglected. Is it not true that you rarely visited your grandmother after that, she pressed. It is true. I did not visit as much as I wish I had. I said I was working, putting myself through school, keeping a roof over my head. Did you come for Christmas, she asked. No, I said. Thanksgiving, she asked. No, I repeated. So from your grandmother's point of view, your siblings were there? You were not. Why is it so unreasonable for her to reward the ones who stayed and not the one who left? She demanded. Because she knew why I left, I said. She saw the family drama, the toxic favoritism. She was the one person who ever told me I deserved better. My leaving did not mean I stopped loving her. It meant I stopped sacrificing myself for parents who never saw me. There is a difference. Or, she said, you are simply using your hurt feelings as justification to take money you did not earn. I felt a flash of anger. I took a breath. I am here because my grandmother wanted all of us to have options. I said, I am here because the only time my parents ever tried to pull me back into the family was when they needed my signature on some papers. I am here because they exploited a sick woman's confusion to tilt the table in their favor. This is not about hurt feelings. This is about my grandmother's autonomy. And yes, it is about payback, in the sense that I will not let the same injustice that shaped my life be written into her legacy. There was a small murmur in the courtroom. The judge banged her gavel lightly for silence. Noah was called as a witness next. He looked uncomfortable, but when asked about that conversation in the kitchen where my parents talked about the will saving them, he did not back down. They were stressed about money, he said. They said once everything with Grandma's estate was settled, we would all be okay. I remember Mom saying Emily deserved it and that Claire would be fine on her own. Like that made it fair. My mother wept when she took the stand. She spoke of changing bedpans and spooning soup into Eleanor's mouth. She painted herself as the devoted daughter, the martyr. She insisted the changes to the will had been Eleanor's idea, a mother's desire to thank the children who stayed. Maria did not attack her care. She did not question the late-night vigils or the emotional exhaustion. Instead, she asked, "Did your mother ever express concern about how you treated Claire?" My mother hesitated. She said I could be hard on her sometimes, she admitted. But that is because Claire was always so distant. She was distant, Maria said quietly. Or you pushed her away. My mother's lip trembled. I did my best, she said. When my father took the stand, he focused on numbers, bills paid, hours spent. He described driving Eleanor to doctor's appointments, picking up prescriptions. Did you ever once question whether your mother-in-law was in the right frame of mind to drastically change her will? Maria asked. I trusted my wife, he said. That is not what I asked, she said. He bristled. She was old, he snapped. Of course she was forgetful sometimes, but she knew who loved her. She knew who was there. She knew who was there, Maria repeated. And did she know that the one granddaughter who had moved away did so because she felt unwanted? That is Claire's story, he said. We all have our own version of events. Yes, Maria said. And that is why we are here, to find a version grounded in facts, not denial. When the testimonies ended, the judge requested closing statements in writing. She would issue a ruling later. The waiting that followed was its own kind of torture. Weeks stretched. Life went on in a strange limbo. The estate remained frozen. My parents stopped calling. Emily's social media posts became icier, more pointed, full of veiled comments about disloyalty and betrayal. Some relatives stopped talking to me altogether. Others reached out quietly to say they understood, that they had seen how my parents treated me, that they were not surprised. On a rainy Tuesday, I was shelving books in the library when my phone buzzed with an email notification from Maria. Subject ruling. My hands shook as I opened it. Call me. I ducked into a back office and dialed her number. Well, I asked. The judge found in our favor, she said. For a second, I did not understand the words. In our favor, I repeated. Yes, she said. She concluded that the final will was the product of undue influence and that your grandmother's cognitive decline called into question her capacity to understand the changes. She has set aside the last will and reinstated the previous one, the one that divided the estate equally among the three of you. My knees felt weak. I sat down in a rolling chair before I could fall. So, I said slowly, it means Maria said you will receive the same share as your siblings. It also means your parents will get less than they thought. The proceeds from the sale of the house will be divided differently. The life raft they were counting on just got smaller. Relief flooded me, mingled with something darker and sharper. I was prepared for the judge to create some middle ground, Maria continued, to maybe give you a smaller portion. But she was very clear. Her ruling cites the medical records, the pattern of your grandmother's past wills, and your parents' own statements about relying on the inheritance. She writes that allowing the final will to stand would reward manipulative behavior and perpetuate harmful favoritism. I laughed, a ragged sound halfway to a sob. For once, someone had named it harmful favoritism, manipulative behavior. Not just in whispered conversations, but in a legal document. Thank you, I said, my voice breaking. You did the hard part, she replied. You walked into that courtroom and told the truth. After we hung up, I sat there in the quiet office, listening to the hum of the fluorescent lights, letting the news sink in. My grandmother's promise had been kept. They had tried to erase me from her legacy. I had written myself back in. The money, when it came, would change my practical life. I could pay off my loans. I could finally quit juggling multiple jobs. I could think about a future that was not always one paycheck away from crisis. But the real victory, the real revenge, was something else. For the first time, my parents had been held accountable for the private choices they had always made with impunity. A judge had looked at their behavior and said in effect, "You cannot do this. Not without consequences." The tables had turned. The fallout was not immediate. For a week there was silence from my family. Then came a text from Noah. "I heard about the ruling," he wrote. "I do not know what to say. I am glad you got what Grandma wanted for you. Mom and Dad are furious. Emily is acting like you robbed her at gunpoint. I am somewhere in the middle." I stared at his message for a long time before replying, "Thank you for telling the truth in there." I wrote, "I know it was not easy." He responded a few minutes later. "It was the right thing to do," he wrote. "I just wish it did not blow everything up." Some things needed to blow up, I thought. My mother's reaction came in the form of a carefully worded email. "I hope you are happy," she wrote. "You humiliated us. You dragged our private family matters into a courtroom and made us look like monsters. Your grandmother's money will not heal whatever is broken inside you. One day when you are a mother, you will understand that sometimes parents do their best, and children still twist everything." I did not reply. My father's message was shorter. "You may have fooled the judge," he wrote, "but you have not fooled us. We know who you really are." It was almost funny. For years they had refused to see who I really was. Now that I had stood up to them, they suddenly claimed to know me. Emily unsurprisingly took to social media again. "Sometimes the law is not the same as justice," she wrote. "In the end, some people get rewarded for walking away, while those who stayed and sacrificed get punished. But karma sees everything." She posted a photo of my grandmother's house with a nostalgic caption. Her followers flooded the comments with hearts and sympathy. I did not comment. I did not try to correct the narrative, because for once I did not need their approval or the crowds. I had the ruling. I had the truth. I had the knowledge that my grandmother's real wishes had been honored. When the estate finally dispersed, a sizable sum appeared in my bank account, more money than I had ever seen under my name. I cried when I saw the balance. Not because I was greedy, because I could finally breathe. I paid off my student loans in one clean, satisfying click. I cleared my credit card. I put aside a portion for taxes, another portion in a savings account. Then I called Jonah and Mark. "We are celebrating," I said, my treat. We went to a small restaurant, nothing flashy, just somewhere nicer than we usually allowed ourselves. I ordered a bottle of wine without checking the price, and when the bill came, I did not feel my stomach clench. "You did it," Jonah said, raising his glass. "You actually did it." "We did it," I corrected. "I could not have done this without you two, or without Maria, or Daniel finally growing a conscience." Mark smiled. "So what is next?" he asked. "Now that you are officially not living paycheck to paycheck." I thought about it. "I want to finish my degree without working myself into the ground," I said. "Maybe start my own consulting business after, help small nonprofits with their tech and Jonah prompted, "And I want to set up something in my grandmother's name," I said slowly. "A scholarship fund, or a small grant, for kids who grew up feeling like they did not count, for the invisible ones." They both nodded. "That sounds like a very Eleanor thing to do," Jonah said. Over the next months, I did exactly that. With Maria's help, I set up a small foundation seeded with a portion of my inheritance. We called it the Invisible No More Fund. It focused on providing micro grants to first-generation college students, especially those estranged from their families. It was not huge, but it was something. Each acceptance letter we sent felt like a quiet piece of payback, not toward my siblings, but toward the mindset that said only the favored deserved help. One afternoon, I drove past my grandmother's old house. A for sale sign stood out front, a bright marker of change. The lawn was a little overgrown. The paint had peeled more, it looked tired. I parked across the street and sat there thinking about all the Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings that had happened inside those walls. All the whispered promises, all the unspoken hurt. I did not feel tempted to buy it. Owning the house would not bring Eleanor back. It would not rewrite the past. It would not turn my parents into the people I had needed them to be. Instead, I let it go. When the house finally sold, my share of the proceeds arrived smaller than my parents had once dreamed, but enough to give me another layer of security. My mother sent one more email. "The house is gone thanks to you," she wrote. "So is our family." I stared at the words, then closed the message without answering. Our family, I thought, had been gone long before the judge's ruling. It had disappeared in the spaces where I should have been seen and was not. It had cracked under the weight of unspoken favoritism and manipulation. The court had not destroyed it. The court had simply refused to pretend it had been whole. One Sunday, I invited a few friends over for dinner in my apartment. Jonah played music, Mark helped me cook. We ate around my wobbly table, laughing about nothing in particular. At one point, I looked around and realized something. This right here was my real family. Not because of blood or shared last names, but because of choice. Because we showed up for each other without tallying debt, because there was no inheritance to fight over, no toxic hierarchy, just mutual respect. Later that night, sitting on the fire escape with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the city lights blink, I thought about revenge. People think revenge is all about dramatic gestures, shouting matches, public humiliation. Maybe some of it is. But the deepest revenge, the kind that actually heals something inside you, looks different. It looks like forcing those who hurt you to face consequences for the first time. It looks like breaking a cycle so it cannot hurt anyone else. And sometimes it looks like building a life so full of peace and purpose that the people who underestimated you cannot stand to look at it. My parents still lived in the same town. Last I heard, they had downsized, selling their big beige house for something smaller. They still posted carefully curated photos on social media. They still talked about family togetherness, tradition. I did not block them, but I did not seek them out. They had wanted me to stay small, grateful on the sidelines. Instead, I had taken a seat at the table my grandmother set for me, and that was a kind of payback they would feel every time they checked the balance of what was left. Life after the ruling did not turn into a fairy tale. There were no magical reunions, no tearful apologies. My parents did not show up on my doorstep one day having seen the light. Emily did not send a heartfelt message saying she understood Noah drifted in and out, sometimes texting, sometimes vanishing into the gravitational pull of our family's old patterns. But something inside me had shifted permanently. I no longer measured my worth by their attention. The Invisible No More Fund grew slowly. We did not have the resources of a giant foundation, but each year we helped a small handful of students with books, fees, emergencies. One young woman, Maya, wrote a thank you note that made me cry. My parents kicked me out when I told them the truth about myself, she wrote. I thought I would have to drop out. Your grant covered the gap in my housing. I do not know you, but I feel less alone, knowing someone out there believes I deserve a chance. I taped that note above my desk. Jonah joked that I had secret billionaire energy now, even though I was far from rich. What I had was enough, enough to live without constant fear, enough to help others, enough to make choices based on desire, not desperation. Mark and I grew closer. We had started as colleagues, then allies in my legal battle. Somewhere in the late-night study sessions and courthouse coffee runs, it became something more. One evening, after we had cooked dinner together in my kitchen, he leaned against the counter and said, I have a question. Is it about obscure case law? I teased. He smiled. No, it is about us. My heartbeat stuttered. Okay, I said. When we first met, he began, you kept everyone at arm's length. You were polite, friendly, but there was this wall. I get it now. Your family taught you that closeness came with strings. That is one way to put it, I said. I do not want to be another person asking you to twist yourself into something more convenient, he said. I like you. I want to build something real with you. But only if it feels like freedom, not another obligation. My throat tightened. The girl I had been at 16 would have doubted him, looked for the hidden price. The woman I was now had done the hardest thing she could imagine. Stood up to her own parents in a courtroom. I am still learning what real love looks like, I said. I know what manipulation looks like. I know what conditional affection feels like. I know what quiet betrayal tastes like. I am just starting to recognize the good kind. We can learn together, he said. I looked at him, at his steady eyes, the way he did not try to fill my silence with promises he could not keep. Okay, I said, let us try. We did not move in together right away. We took it slow. I kept my own bank account, my own routines, my own sense of self. But it felt different from my parents' version of togetherness, where every kindness came with a ledger. One day, as we walked through a park, we saw a family on a picnic blanket. A grandmother, gray-haired, laughing as she tried to keep a toddler from tipping over a bowl of strawberries. The child's mother reached over, fixing the baby's hat, her face tender. A pang hit my chest. Hey, Mark said softly. You okay? I was just thinking, I said, about how different my life might have been if my parents had loved like that. If I had grown up feeling wanted. He squeezed my hand. Maybe, he said. But then, You might not have become the woman who fought for herself and for your grandmother. The one who started that fund? The one who sits in courtrooms and refuses to let injustice slide just because it is happening behind closed doors. I smiled faintly. Revenge had given me something unexpected, a deeper commitment to fairness in everything. At work, when I saw a student being treated dismissively because of their accent or clothes, I stepped in. On campus committees, I spoke up about policies that hurt the most vulnerable. I did not always win, but I did not stay silent. One spring, the university hosted a panel about family estrangement. Someone had dropped my name as a possible speaker. At first, I said no. The idea of standing on a stage and telling my story to a room full of strangers felt too raw. Then I thought about Maya's note, about all the students the fund helped, who thought they were alone. I said yes. On the day of the panel, I stood at a podium, my hands wrapped around the edges, and told a shortened version of my story. I spoke of Thanksgiving dinners, where I felt like a ghost, of birthdays forgotten, of a grandmother who promised not to let me be erased, and the legal fight that kept that promise alive. I did not name my parents. I did not list every cruelty. I focused on the pattern, the lesson. Sometimes I said the people who hurt you the most share your last name. Sometimes the most radical healing act of revenge is to build a life where their approval is no longer the currency you live on. When the panel ended, a line formed. Students came up to me, some with tears in their eyes, some too choked up to speak. They said things like, "That is my father. That is my mother." I thought I was the only one. "You are not," I told them. Afterward, as the auditorium emptied, my phone buzzed. A new email. Subject: your panel. The sender was an address I recognized but had not seen in my inbox for a long time. Noah. I watched the dots appear as he typed. "I saw the recording of your talk," he wrote. It popped up in someone's story. I did not know. I mean, I guess I did know, but seeing it laid out like that, I am sorry. For my part in it. For the years I let Mom and Dad's version of you be the only one I listened to. I stared at the screen, a mix of hope and caution swirling in my chest. He kept typing. "I am not asking for forgiveness," he wrote. "I know that is not automatic. I just wanted you to know I am trying to see it differently now. I am trying not to pass this on. Trying." I thought of him maybe with kids of his own someday, deciding whether to break the cycle or repeat it. "Be better," I wrote back, "for them. That is all I want." He replied a minute later. "I will try," he wrote. I believed him. Or rather, I chose to believe he could change. Whether he did or not was not my responsibility. That was another strange gift of revenge. It clarified the boundaries of ownership. What was mine to carry? What was theirs? I could not fix my parents. I could not rewrite the past. I could only decide how much power their choices had over my future. A year later, I got a message out of the blue from a woman I did not know. "Hi, Claire," she wrote. "I am a friend of your grandmother's, from her old book club. I found your foundation online. I just wanted to say Eleanor would be so proud. We used to talk about you. She worried. You thought you were alone. She would be thrilled to see you helping others feel seen." I read that message twice, 3 times, letting the words sink in. She would be proud. That more than any gavel, any ruling, any check with my name on it, felt like the true victory. Sometimes late at night, I stand at my apartment window and look out at the city. The lights gleam like scattered stars. Somewhere out there, families are gathering around dinner tables, arguing, laughing, loving each other badly and well. Somewhere a child is blowing out birthday candles while someone films on a phone. Somewhere another kid is washing dishes alone while their siblings get all the attention. I think of that girl I used to be. The one sitting on the edge of her bed at 16, phone's silent tears falling onto a pillow she had learned to cry into quietly. If I could touch her shoulder now, I would say, "You are not invisible. You are not crazy. This feeling of being unseen is not proof that you are unworthy. It is evidence that the people around you have limited vision, and one day you are going to walk into a room where their vision does not define your value." For me, that room was a courtroom. For someone else, it might be a therapist's office, a friend's living room, a new apartment rented on a tiny salary but full of autonomy. Revenge, the kind that draws viewers in and keeps them listening, is not just about the payoff of seeing the toxic parents lose their house or the greedy sister lose her unearned inheritance. It is about the emotional journey from being acted upon to taking deliberate action, from injustice to clarity, from betrayal to boundaries, from being excluded to choosing where you belong. When my story ends up on a screen, maybe you will hear only the most dramatic beats: the forgotten birthday, the will reading, the courtroom showdown, the judge's ruling setting aside the last will and reinstating the one that kept me in. You might cheer when my parents realize they are not getting the windfall they counted on. You might feel that thrill when the tables are finally turned, when karma and payback show up wearing a robe and holding a gavel instead of a lightning bolt. I felt that thrill too. But the real revenge happened in quieter moments. When I sat with a student who had just been cut off by her parents and helped her fill out emergency grant forms. When I turned down my mother's attempt to guilt me into a Christmas call by replying with silence. When I chose to spend my newly inherited money on my own stability and on the lives of strangers who reminded me of younger versions of myself. Every time I chose not to let my parents' narrative define me, that was another small act of defiance, another brick in the life I was building. If you have watched or listened this far, maybe something in my story resonates with you. Maybe you have your own version of my parents. Maybe you have your own. Eleanor, the one person who saw you when others did not. Maybe you are somewhere between the hurt and the healing, unsure which way to turn. Here is what I learned the hard way. You are allowed to walk away from toxic family dynamics, even if other people call it betrayal. You are allowed to seek justice, even if the people who wronged you accuse you of being vengeful. You are allowed to rewrite the story everyone else has been telling about you. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to keep playing the role they cast you in. My parents once told everyone I was the difficult child, the ungrateful one, the one who abandoned the family. Now, when I tell my story, I call myself something else. I am the one who refused to stay invisible. If you felt something in this story, if it made you think of your own life or someone you love, I hope you will sit with that feeling for a while. Maybe share it, maybe talk about it. Maybe, just maybe, use it as a nudge to draw your own boundaries a little more clearly. And if you want to hear more stories like this one about revenge and family drama and hidden truths and the quiet power of saying no more, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have walked into that courtroom? Would you have let the will stand? Or would you, like me, have decided that finally, after a lifetime of being overlooked, it was time to sit at the table and claim your share of the story? This version of my life grew from an older draft one once told in another tongue. But this is the chapter where the revenge finally lands where it belongs.